Hey everybody, Bandicoot Commando here, and welcome back to Rayman 3. Last time, I showed off all the little Wanna Kick Rayman shorts, and I also included at the end two of them that are only exclusive to the GameCube version over in Europe. So, today is the day we talk about the game's development, and oh boy, this is going to be a long one, is all I could say. Because I have so many things here. So many things. Let's hope we can get through all of them. Alright, so, in the beginning, when Rayman 3 was under development, very early development, the earliest iteration of it would have been a game called Rayman 2000. The existence of Rayman 2000 is only known through l'Histoire de Rayman, which literally it's French, which would translate into the history of Rayman. The history of Rayman also has a few notes in regards to Rayman 3 as well. At the end of 1998, after the release of Rayman 2 and before the start of the proper development of Rayman 3, some people were over at Ubisoft were working on a project that had the code name Rayman 2000. It was to be a direct sequel to Rayman 2, still in 3D, but it would have been in a more urban environment, though. It would have been in towns, streets, and buildings that were attached to trees. That said, the more urban environment, which is not exactly Rayman's flavor, since it's more used to being in a natural environment, the urban setting, though, was requested by Michel Ancel himself. Because of that, though, there's really not much known about Rayman 2000. It was more or less canceled around the early 2000s. The city and the concept art that of Clearleaf Forest, though, is meant to serve as inspiration from Rayman 2000. Some ideas of the concept as well were taken to create the city of Aeropolis, which was the city in Rayman the animated series, which I may or may not talked about at one point. With Rayman 2000 being cancelled, and with proper development started, the early idea of the font, at least, of Rayman 3 was that originally it did use the Rayman 2 font. Then, they tried it again with the font from Rayman M, which Rayman M was a multiplayer game, racing game, which, at least over in Europe, they call it Rayman M, but here in America, we have Rayman Arena or Rayman Rush, depending on which version you got. The earliest designs and developments of Rayman 3, it initially used a lot of the assets and designs and such from Rayman 2. As you can see in this image, with Rayman fighting Razov, in which it used the early HUD display from Rayman 2. There's a lot of other features in regards to that. Again, another one with Rayman in the Destiny arena battling Reflux. And a lot of other unique stuff here. Early designs of the Hoodlum headquarters. Rayman in Clearleaf Forest. The Desert of Canaran. The Summit Beyond the Clouds. An early version of the Summit Beyond the Clouds, what in a scrapped unknown area, and so on and so forth. Lots of interesting images. The story itself had a lot of interesting stuff, at least an early version. In the beta demos, in the beta and the demos of the game, you can find scrapped dialogue deep within the data. Some of the differences that were in this story and such was that one of them would have been was that Murphy would have stuck around with Rayman a lot longer. In fact, this is pretty unique because although Murphy just appears in the beginning of the game, he has a spot in the manual that would more or less justify that he was meant to have played a bigger role, which was part of the original story. There would have been a character named Ludivine, who she would have provided advice for Rayman and Glowbox, and she could have probably been a Ludiv. A Ludiv is one of those little fairies that you could save in Rayman 2. Clark would have reappeared, but who knows what his role would have been. The Hoodlums were capable of speech. There was an idea that Rayman would have had to get to the top of a volcano to obtain a silver loom. And a version of catching the flying hooks, which were the loom rings, as well. An idea of the final battle between Reflux and Rayman was that in order for Rayman to free the Leptis from Reflux's control, he would have broke mirrors directing magic towards Reflux first, and then destroyed the scepter by redirecting the rays towards it. Silver looms and other looms of such could have gotten through for the power-ups in Rayman 3 before they had to go back to it and with the washing can powers. I cannot speak for some reason. What is going on? Oh boy. Trying to straighten my mouth here so I can talk. If there's one thing Rayman does have, if it's not just for the story, there's a lot of scrapped characters and creatures. How about we start with the creatures that are in the game but through Easter eggs, though. The first of these creatures that I want to say is Goaty. Goaty, I believe, is the sheep-looking creature at the end of this piece of concept art. Although Goaty does not appear in the game, in the final game, it does appear as a statue with Razov riding on top of it. Another creature that was supposed to appear was the Snoot. Snoot is, according to its description, and I should say this creature may or may not really be Snoot. It only fits part of the description, though. But the Snoot was, according to its description here, was that Rayman was to have come across this kind of hippopotamus in the Clearleaf Forest. He had no particular purpose in the game. He was just an environmental animal drinking from a stream. Another creature, and a more important one, which we don't have images or art to, is the Snorty. The Snorty was supposed to have a role in which the idea, according to its description, it had rabbit-like ears and a pig-like nose, and it was dressed in a vest made of animal hide and carrying a shoulder bag. Basically, its role would have been is that if you were unable to solve a puzzle within the game, Snorty would appear to assist you in order to help you solve the puzzles easier. Although Snorty doesn't appear, there is dialogue found within the game data. And its quote here within the data is, "It's not even possible to have a nap here." Before I move, hold on. Wonder if okay. Moving on, Snorty. So after Snorty, let's see. There was meant to have been a creature called the Hoover. The Hoover is described as a carnivorous plant of sorts that would have tried biting at Rayman. Its description here is this carnivorous plant is a great lover of plums. Rayman was supposed to make it harmless by throwing enormous plums into its mouth to keep it shut. While the idea of it being a plant is not represented in this image, there's this box mechanical thing that's definitely meant to be the Hoover based on its description. The only way you could have neutralized it was throwing a plum at it. So while it's not called Hoover, it does have similarities with it. So it's possible that this thing is still meant to be Hoover, the Hoover, or alternatively, it's just similar to it in some regard. Lee, one of Rayman's allies, was supposed to reappear in the game. Although Lee only makes a cameo in the longest shortcut as a statue, she does have concept art of a new appearance. Let's just say I'm glad that they did not go with her new appearance here because it just doesn't suit her well. But she also has a model, though, which would intend that she did make it far enough in development before they decided to scrap her. Let's see. There is a species of teensies. Although the teensies you release in the game, they have different like little names that you could find. Oh, excuse me. Different little names that they have. So basically, the ones you save in Clearly Forest and in the Bog of Murk are known as Silkins, I believe. Oh God, I gotta do a lot of sniffling. Anyway, Silkins. The teensies in the land of the living dead are known, if I could find them, they are known as Tufkins, I think. Or no, not those. No. They are Grishkins. They're the more ghostly kind, and they have a great design, if you ask me. The standard teensies were used for the Desert of the Canaran and a few other areas. The Tufkins were the kind for the summit beyond the clouds. While the few that you can find in the Tower of Leptis are known as the Nukins. There was meant to be a type in the Bog of Murk known as Merkins. Unfortunately, though, although they have a model and such, they were never used. The Silkins were used in their place instead. As for other scrapped creatures, the ones that you can find, so as you know, twice I went to a secret area in the Tower of Leptis. where we encountered three strange creatures. One of these was the Bonton. I called it the Botod, but it's Bonton, I believe. Bontons were meant to have played a bigger role in the game. The way they would have been played was that they would have been puzzle. Most of them would have been used for puzzle elements, in which each time you encountered a Bonton, depending on what its physical attributes were, either it had horns, or it had wings, or a trunk, very thick fur, etc., the Bonton had a function on solving the puzzle. For example, the ones with horns, for instance. Rayman would have found barriers that he couldn't break. So, in order to break them, Rayman would have to trick the horn Bontons into charging them down. Or the ones with wings, they would have to use on their backs. And so on and so forth. But, in the end, though, they weren't exactly satisfied with the design for the Bontons, especially the ones that had more unique figures to them. Only the one with the horns were understandable, but the ones with wings and such just were not satisfying in the slightest. So in the end, the Bontons were not exactly used, save for that one that's in the cage. The bird creature that I showed is known as a glute. According to their description here, in the beta that is, jumping bird, the glute is mostly found around towns and villages where it looks for food. In spite of its spindly build, the glute is able to swallow everything: animal, vegetable, stone, metal. In fact, it is used as a garbage chute amongst certain teensy populations. The glute probably wasn't really meant to have played any kind of role in particular. They probably could have been used for puzzles, but who knows. It's said that the sound of a gong being hit is actually similar to the scream of frightened baby glutes. And the Canaran cannot resist the call of these in order to find them and beat them, apparently. But other than that, yeah, glutes were probably just simply used for just background reasoning and maybe some puzzles. I keep calling Glowbox a glute, even though he's not. Glowbox is his own species. In fact, he's just simply referred to as Glowbox's species. No proper name. So, moving on. Moving on. We then have this creature that was in the zoo, the Zowar. The Zowar is a giant gorilla like creature. According to its description here, this species of gigantic gorilla reached an advanced state of development. A 2D sketch, followed by 3D modeling, had been made of him. He was intended to be a boss from the Clearleaf Forest, into which Rayman escaped during a race chase viewed from the front, while doing his best to avoid obstacles. Unfortunately, programmers found this enormous character too difficult to tame because of his size. However, though, he was set aside. The more skillful Rayman 3 players succeeded in detecting his presence in a hidden level at the end of the game. So yeah, Zowar, as explained, was planned to be a boss in Clearleaf Forest, which at a point there would have been a chase sequence where Rayman would have had to run away, and it would have been viewed from a front perspective similar to Crash Bandicoot, while trying to avoid obstacles. but its size, again, the size of the creature made it difficult to work with. And there was also another reason for dropping Zoar, because there was really nothing in the game's story to justify the chase scene. Although Zoar doesn't appear in the way it was supposed to, he still makes appearances. Other than appearing um, in the secret area in the Tower of Leptis, that wanted poster I showed long ago has him on it. He's also in the loading screen for Rayman 3 as well. And although Zoar's only appearance in the tower with him running, he still has animations on which would depict his boss battle. There's one where he is beating his chest, and another where he slams his fist on the ground, and he does have a defeat animation. So therefore it is quite possible that he did get pretty far in terms he did get pretty far in the game. Before we continue, I need to do 2 more little things. We'll make that 3 more little things, but just give me a sec. Shouldn't take me too long. And 1 more. Okay, there we go. Anyway, back to business. Although with me explaining with the levels and such, there was one place in the game that a level that was cut out entirely. In the final game, there's only 9 levels with different segments, as I put it. It's an odd number to have, but there was meant to have been 10 levels. One level was just simply known as the aquatic world. It was an entirely aquatic level. It was probably not entirely exclusively underwater, but it was definitely water heavy. This level, the story and such to this level was that around this aquatic world, there are these jellyfish creatures known as Zax, I believe. Zax are described, according to their artwork and description, Zax are jellyfish-like creatures, and that the hoodlums were exploiting the Zax. In this lagoon area, they have set up a giant washing machine of sorts to help the Zax wash their clothing. The Zax were powering the machine. This laundry machine was known as the Lavomatic. And that this would have cultivated with Rayman having a fight with a Hoodlum sub, and even it's quite possible that the Leviathan boss in the Land of the Living Dead was probably meant to have been for this aquatic world instead of the Land of the Living Dead. So, in the end, though, the level was cut out. The whole aquatic world and level was cut out, even though these Zax do have 3D models. The reason they cut it out was, according to them, it lacked rhythm, is what they pretty much said, was just how the concept, and not just for time constraints at all, the story and the level just lacked rhythm overall. So therefore, what could have been would have been a very, very cool concept of an underwater level. Speaking of underwater levels, and with me mentioning the Lavomatic, there's this strange container that has a plum in it. Nobody knows what it does, but based from what I see looking at it, I think it's meant to be what a Hoover looks like once you get a plum in it. But who knows? You can still hack the game and find it. Speaking of which, speaking of plums, plums were meant to have played a different role in the game, really. Early in development, the idea with plums was that if you could and wanted to, if you destroyed a plum with a fully charged shot, its juices would stick to Rayman, and it would allow you to climb on slippery surfaces. Dude, if only they could have kept something like that. Now, how about we talk about some Hoodlum designs that did not make it into the game? Very cool designs for some of them. The Hoodlums, I should say, on how they came to be, is according to Stefana Stephanie Zanetti, I think, or Zanetti, I think that's how you say their last name. They were designed by the lead character designer. According to what Stephanie had to say here, or Stefan, I should say, Stefan. Well, according to what they say here, we were looking for a fairly simple principle that would be easy to offer in a variety of forms for several characters, without repeating exactly the same thing. The idea for the Hoodlums came from one of my sketches. It was sort of a Mexican holding a fat rifle and wearing a big sombrero and a kind of poncho covering his whole body. He was a blend of Darkman, Mr. Dark, from Rayman 1, a mysterious character rolled up in his cloak for those who don't know him, and the Hunter, also in Rayman 1, the Hunter enemies. Then came the idea to make characters out of cloth. This was easy for the players to recognize, and very simple for us to vary. What's more, rendering the flexibility of different fabrics was a graphic challenge that was interesting to take up. Once we found the basic principle, we worked on the basic psychologies to create a whole heap of characters. For example, using a slightly mannered and mysterious profile, we created Hoodoo, an elongated sorcerer. For Slapdash, we wanted to create a fat moron, so we made him a nice bright strawberry color and gave him a vacant look and a fairly oafish physique. So, in this image, you could see that in this image there are this concept art here was that one of the ideas was that the hoodlums would have been encountered in a sort of, I guess you could say, progressive fashion in a hierarchy of sorts. The their guns and rifles here are in French, and I really do not want to translate any of that, but it's pretty much understandable on what it's meant to be. Now, and in this one, where all the hoodlums are that made it into the game and are rendered and textured and modeled, you can see there are a few unique and unused designs here. And the same goes to that previous bit of artwork. So let's talk about it. The first of these is simply just known as the Gunslinger Hoodlum. This little guy here appears in that lineup of the concept art of the Hoodlum's hierarchy, as I put it. The little gunslinger here was probably meant to have been a small enemy in which they would have been very quickly fire at you. But the problem is, and due Well, not the problem. And due to their small size and quickness, they probably were very easy to dispose of. Unfortunately, though, or maybe not exactly unfortunately, but this is pretty much one of the hoodlum ideas that was never truly brought to life in any way or form. The closest thing to the gunslinger hoodlum, to be honest, would be the Grim, or the Grimmies, I should say. The little Grim guys are the little guys the Grim Keeper lets out. And as seen in the prototype image of the lineup, the Grims themselves had a different appearance where they were just simply little skulls that could fly and carry the explosive kegs. Anyway, another hoodlum variant that is unique but not fully used was the Hoodloon. The Hoodloon I briefly talked about when we encountered them in the summit beyond the clouds. Although it is fully modeled and animated and such, you never encounter them in combat. You only see them that one time, but that was because the Hoodloon was meant to have been another flying enemy. The idea is that with the metal cap on their head, they would have dived bomb into Rayman as a form of attack, but the problem is, unlike the Hoodstormer, which could just simply hover in place, the Hoodloon was an active flyer in which it would have been hard to keep track of. Which is the reason why they could not use the Hoodloon as an enemy, due to the choice of cameras for combat. And so therefore, as neat and cool as a design the Hoodloon is, it could not, the camera system just could not work for it in combat. It even does have a description as well. Equipped with pairs of leathery bat-like wings, the Hoodloon division is on a mission to achieve air superiority. Unfortunately, the Hoodloons are so batty about their ability to fly that they rather be superheroes than soldiers. This is why early in the Summit Beyond the Clouds, that one Hoodloon was pretty much playing superhero anyway by lifting hoodlums up. Such a fun design, and the name especially is just such a fun thing. Anyway, now that we're done with the Hoodloon, another unused Hoodlum variant would have been known as... Man, I'm gonna sneeze. Where is it? Is this the one? Sure, yeah, this is the one. So here's the thing. This Hoodlum doesn't have a name in the sense of hood. The Hoodlums had different names, I should say, in the early... Oh, excuse me. In early development. Hoodlums were once called Cagolards. I'm pretty sure the Cago part was probably meant to have been French or something, but I don't know for sure. This was the Caglo biome. I'm pretty sure it's meant to be French in some sense or form. This is why I'm just going to call them the Hood Duo, even though I don't think that works well for their name. The Cago biome was an enemy that was of two Hoodlums. One was small and thin, and the other is tall and fat. The duo here had two fun attacks playing up at their sizes here. Distance attacks would be that the tall one would start rolling like a ball while the little one is balancing on top of him and trying to steer him into crushing Rayman. For up-close combat attacks, the big guy would use the little guy like a nunchuck, which is very funny to picture. Despite the game design and very fun methods of attacking Rayman, they had to discard and scrap the enemy because the choices of the attacks. And not to mention, again, with the cameras. One of them being was that the first attack, the rolling attack, would require a lot of space. A lot of space to have to roll into you. And the second attack, which while being very fun to think of, it was actually very difficult to animate and program. But like I said, at least in the E3 2002 demo of the game, they do exist. Their textures are in the game, which means that it was in some way or form in the game before it had to have been removed. Such a fun design, but sadly it just had to have been removed. What a shame. Next is well, actually, before we get to the next part, let me talk about a quick thing in regards to the Hoodoo sorcerer. Other than this early design, which is very eye-catching, the Hoodoo was actually a lot more powerful early on. It had the ability to not only protect its allies, but it was able to shoot fireballs at Rayman and even catch his fist and block it. This made the Hoodoo more powerful than what it should be. So, due to the fact that it was able to not only attack Rayman and neutralize his own attacking ability and defend other hoodlums, they removed all of the Hoodoo's abilities, save for the ability to protect its allies. At best, though, you probably could have just kept its ability to attack Rayman. Make it switch between defending and attacking, at least. And next we have the Siamese Hoodlum. The Siamese Hoodlum was, well, other than this piece of concept, that's just all there is to know about it. The Hoodlum is just basically two hoodlums joined together through stitching. One side of the hoodlums had two different parts with their arm. One side is green and holds a boxing glove arm, while the other one seems to have a cannon for a hand. It would have been was that, with the way that this hoodlum worked, was that at a distance, the one with the cannon would have shot at you, but if you got close, the one with the boxing glove would have punched at you. Although this hoodlum was removed, what's interesting is that, similar to the Kago Biome, in the E3 demo, with its textures, its file name in the demo is actually the same as the Heckler's textures. This would imply that either A, the Siamese Hoodlum was originally the Heckler, or at least would have filled the role of the Heckler, or that both of them existed at some way or form. I never really pictured the Siamese Hoodlum as a Heckler. I would have assumed it would have been an early version of the Spinaroo, if anything. As shown in this image, as I will put it, there was a lot of other things with designs and such. A lot of hoodlums had different texture designs, obviously, that didn't make it, and some enemies as well. But one of these, as you could see, other than this early texture model of Razov and a Canarin, is a muddy bog. The muddy bogs were a lot different as well in this beta, in which they were just called simply muddies. The muddy bogs, instead of throwing rocks at you, they would have thrown mud at you that they were covered in. And that there was a gigantic variant that was made as well. These gigantic ones would have slammed their fist on the ground trying to crush Rayman. In the end, though, the Muddy Bog's designs were tweaked and the gigantic ones were cut from the final game. When it yet comes again to... Oh, excuse me. When it comes again to story and such, the 2002 demo, I believe, has an answer to this. Sorry, hold on. Sorry. Yeah, I'm getting that mixed up. Hold on a sec. The press kit of Rayman 3 does have some interesting things. An early design for Romeo here. A hoodmonger soldier, or simply a hood styler as they're known as. I kept calling them by artillerymen. And a design with reflux when he was mutated at the end. Rayman 3 is interesting for the fact that, or should I say Rayman 3 HD, has a lot of these beta elements in the game, and that they even went as far as to upscale the old textures into HD. These big ones would be these 5 images from these that was meant to have been part of the story. This first image here, and keep in mind, this is in French, but I can somewhat translate it. It's not because I know French, it's because I've already kind of translated these beforehand, so I kind of know what it is. But this first image here is that Rayman and Glowbox are flying on a creature known as the Woogla. The Woogla also has textures and a model in the game's data. The Woogla was a giant bird that would have taken Rayman and Glowbox to the land of the living dead. As they were flying, however, the Woogla would have become injured in some way or form, probably from a Hoodlum attack, and this would have caused them to land in the Bog of Murk. From there, Murphy advises Rayman to find Belganex for help, while Glowbox stays with the Woogla. From there, Rayman would find the witch, and Belganex explains to Rayman how she had witnessed everything from her mirror, and that she can help Rayman and Glowbox if Rayman does a little thing for her. And that little thing is to find the Elixir of Beauty. This Elixir of Beauty, which would help her obtain a beautiful form. From there, Rayman would have found and encountered Razov, and upon defeating him, I think I'm gonna sneeze. Yeah, I'm gonna sneeze. Great. Can I stop sneezing? Ow. So, yeah, upon finding Razov and fighting Razov, and upon being defeated, Razov would have then started to cry, and from there his teardrops would have turned a nearby ugly, those little creatures he keeps, into a butterfly, a beautiful butterfly creature. From there, it's then shown that Razov tears are, in fact, the elixir of beauty, in which Meganex would have used on herself to make herself look a lot more better and attractive, and Razov would have fallen in love with her. From there, we would have gotten this happy image. Okay, Mega X doesn't look so beautiful in this image, but still. From there, to thank Rayman for what he has done, Mega X and Razov would have looked after and tend for the Woogla, but using one of her mirrors, Rayman and Globox would have then went to the land of the living dead. In this image, it just simply shows the desert of Canaran, or as it's said here, it is referred to as the Deadlands. This is probably just meant, excuse me, this was probably, this image with the text probably just is meant to be on how Rayman and Globox first arriving at the desert. This next image, in which it seems as though is that Globox and Rayman are having some fun with King Gumsy here, and you can also notice Murphy is up here. The text, when translated, really, along the lines, is that Rayman asks if Gumsy can show them the way to the Temple of Leptis. I'm guessing this is before Rayman receives the power, and he decides that maybe having a small bit of power of the Leptis might help. And from there, Gumsy agrees to his request. That is, if Rayman promises not to forget his fellow Canaran. And by the wording of that, I'm pretty sure in this scene, it was that Rayman and Globox and Murphy become honorary Canaran members, I guess you could say. And in this last image shows Reflux with Andre and his army of looms, of black looms, heading to the Tower of Leptis, and with Reflux evoking its power to obtain the power. All in all, quite an interesting story that nearly made it to its final piece, really. The whole story of Rayman 3 with the whole power of Leptis at least stayed in the original story. Quite interesting when you thought it would have been changed along the way. Now, the only other thing left I could share with Rayman 3's story, and I am losing track of so many things that are just to talk about with this game, would be mini games. And also I could talk about the HD version as well. There are 3 mini games that, actually not mini games, there are 2 mini games that were scrapped and didn't make it. One of them was a chest mini game. Although it wasn't in the final game, its description is still within the disk in the data. According to its description, with this chest mini game, let's see, just like playing chess, except you throw plums to zap hoodlums instead of moving pawns to put the king in check. To move, use the left stick. To kick the plum, press the fire button. To quit, press look mode button. To move, use the left stick. To jump, press the jump. To shoot, press the shoot. Okay. Nothing else is known about the minigame, except you would have probably thrown plums instead of moving pawns. And another minigame would have involved Zoar again. Although Zoar was cut from being a boss, they decided to try and implement his chase as a minigame instead, which, although much like the chess minigame, there's at least a description for it, and the description says, the Zoar is the kindest of creatures. Convinced that Rayman suffers through not having arms and legs, he runs after him to put an end to his torment. To move, use the left stick. To jump, press the jump button. Oh, excuse me. From there, there's just nothing else known about this minigame. It was probably removed because of the same reasons with the initial boss chase sequence, was that Zoar was just too big to work with. Now, there are these two minigames that are exclusive, or three, I should say. These three minigames that are exclusive to the GameCube version of Rayman 3. Now, I did talk that to unlock 2D Madness, you had to simply connect the Game Boy Advance version of Rayman 3 to the GameCube version of Rayman 3, and you have to do it with a link cable. This one minigame is called Mad Tracks, and it's a two-player game. Player 1 uses the GameCube controller, while Player 2 is using the Game Boy Advance. The idea is that the GameCube player is controlling and moving Rayman in his crazy shoe and maneuvering through a race course while collecting gems. The player on the Game Boy Advance is actually building the track in a game similar to Tetris. The two must cooperate in order to win. The description here is, only with his shoe cart can Rayman pass through this secret area. But where is the road? And your friend, a great road builder, Glowbox's hand. A similar minigame called Wheelus is also unlocked as well. To unlock Wheelus, and I believe Mad Tracks as well, at the same time, actually, no. You have to unlock Wheelus. To unlock it, you need to have at least 350,000 or more in score. And to play Wheelus, again, you need to connect two Game Boy Advances to the GameCube. Wheelus is similar to Mad Tracks, but the difference is that Player 3 and 4 are different, and the whole goal is to get to the end instead. Basically, Rayman Team 1 and Team 2. Rayman and Glowbox are Team 1, while Team 2 is Gumsy as the shoe cart racer, while another character who is laying the track for him, who may or may not be Reflux. And so, the goal is, as stated, while the Game Boy players are building the road in the Tetris minigame, the racing players are to drive along on the track they're making, as well as destroying objects in the way with missiles. You have to get to the finish as quickly as possible and try not to fall off the platforms and hit checkpoints. Whoever can get to the end wins. And lastly, a very infamous one, as I'll put it, is how there's this one minigame, 2D Nightmare. 2D Nightmare is one of the minigames that's exclusive to the GameCube version of Rayman 3. However, the problem is well, to unlock it, you need to connect a copy of the Game Boy Advance version of Rayman 3 to the GameCube version when everything is complete. However, the problem is due to a programming error, when you complete the final level in the Game Boy Advance version, it doesn't register as being completed. Part of it is that once it resets the game, if anything, is why it doesn't register. So the only way you could play 2D Nightmare is that you have to use Game Shark and cheat a bit, or Action Replay, I should say. According to its description, when Rayman was younger, he only had 2 dimensions. The difference with this one was that 2D Nightmare was in Picture City instead of the Dream Forest, and the throttle copter power up is also in as well. So, yeah, it's sad to know that the this this level and that this minigame that was meant to have been cannot be done well just because of a programming error. But enough with the negative stuff. Why don't we mention Rayman 3 HD? Here's something that I noticed with Rayman 3 HD. They the cover is actually a lot different. First off, one subtle thing I noticed with the cover is that first off, they removed the subtitle Hoodlum Havoc, and that Rayman is smiling instead of like looking all ready to throw his punch. The font and the logo of Rayman 3 HD are to match Rayman Origins. The original version opened with a trailer that had Groove Armada's Matter in the game. This was removed and just replaced with a new trailer with new music. The intro sequence of the game had the old Ubisoft logo against the night sky. They briefly cut that moment out from the intro. There's a lot of glitches and audio errors. One of the lines from the fairies from the Fairy Council is, "Oh my god, what is going on here?" They censored the "Oh my god" part, but they kept "Oh my god" in the Crush minigame. The sky and water in Clearleaf Forest has some weird changes going on and discolorings. The extras in the bonus section uses artwork from Rayman Origins, art booklet which came from the collector's edition, as I've mentioned. Some shadows on the objects glitch up, and a bunch of other stuff. The jewels and red looms cast light on the geometry around them. Another one is that the Grand Minius' crown is transparent, and level scores are now shown at the end of boss battle sections as well. But at least the bonus of playing the Rayman 3 HD version is that you at least get to see the artwork of Rayman Origins. But I think with that, I think that will do. I've went on way longer than what I should. Way, way longer. I didn't know it was going to turn out this long. So that will do for this episode of Rayman 3. That was so long. I never knew I would have done a development video this long, but I knew it was coming. One day it was coming. So now I got to go through all of this whole editing process, and can I get this done in time is all I could say. So I'm not going to say what my next game is, but you'll see. So that is it, and I will see you guys in my next Let's Play.